a definition of poetry that I'm interested in comes from the poet and critic Ivor Winters. His definition of a poem is deceptively simple. A poem is a statement in words about a human experience that pays particular attention to connotation or the emotional charge of language. Poems are made out of words. You put words together, they, very naturally form statements. But it's the nature of that statement that is very particular to poetry, because the way that the statement is formed has a musical charge to it. And it's that musical charge, that rhythm in language, that is the conduit for the expression of feeling. And that's what poetry is all about. The English critic I.A. Richards says somewhere that reading poems isn't so much about pattern recognition, and there's a lot of talk about how, maybe we're hardwired to perceive patterns in works of art, and that perception of the pattern is therefore pleasurable. But Richard says, no, it's not so much that you're locating or discerning or discovering pattern in the work of art. It's that in experiencing the work of art, you yourself are becoming patterned. Poets manage this kind of musical aspect through the organization of words into rhythmic patterns. And that's a music that you can dance to, right? Now you've set up an expectation, right? Now I'm with you, I'm in the groove. And if you vary it so that, there's a line that was short, a beat, you feel that. Or there's one that has that extra beat, right? So that feels like there's a kind of weight to it that's different than the line that comes before or after it. And that, as in music, right? So you set up an expectation, and then if you delay the gratification or the return to the expected note, the tonic or whatever it is, you create a kind of tension. And that tension is expressive. The poet is responsible for not every word in the line, but every syllable in the line, or every phoneme in the line. So that in organizing language at that level, into an expressive pattern, now I'm sort of working as a poet. The problem in writing in meter, particularly as you're starting out, is that it doesn't add energy to the language. It kills energy. Because usually, until you really know how to use it to make music, the patterns tend to be dull, repetitive, inert, flat. Some people who really pride themselves on being formal poets they fail to launch. I mean, it never rises to the condition of music. There's somehow a feeling that if I dutifully fill out the metrical pattern, if I'm correct in my numbers, then I've somehow achieved the poem. And that seems to me a deadly approach. It's not about whether your numbers are right or whether you're writing in strict meter. It's about what do you do to language to turn it into expressive music. The emphasis in prose is much more on denotation, I want the meaning of the words as they exist in the dictionary to convey very clearly the sense of what I'm describing. Whereas in poetry, the denotation is almost secondary to the emotional charge of language. And so poets like Frost and Eliot say things like, you can be moved by a poem before you even understand the sense of the words, because the song that the poem is singing, that the poet is singing, is affecting and communicates feeling before just the dictionary sense of the words it really even enters in fully. So that's a different kind of statement. It's a different kind of argument, if you will. How many lines of of literature of verse actually are still alive, still have life in them so many years after the fact? Very few, right? So I think that as a writer, you've got to be ruthless. Whatever you need to do to get the pieces in place that add energy and give life to the expression, and that the nature of the life is not exhausted with a single reading, but continues to kind of warm the work from within, possibly, indefinitely. That's very hard to do. So you might as well use all the tricks in the book. And if the tricks aren't working, then those aren't the right ones. But fill up your toolkit with as many, tools as you can. What poetry does particularly well, in a way, it's the most precise set of tools that we have in language for communicating feeling connected to an experience. Now that you've written into language a kind of music, how do you honor that in communicating it to a listener? Emily Dickinson has that famous line about she knows she's in the presence of poetry when she feels as if the top of her head is being lifted off, or again, I'm mangling all these quotations. But I don't take that as some, distant metaphor. I think that is the physiological response to the work of art. It just sends chills through your body. It blows your mind, that's figurative. But you know what I mean.